Hello friends, welcome to the MARE Podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the MARE project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy! Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the MARE Podcast. It's great to see you all, I guess. I don't know, that was a weird start. I'm not going to do it again. I've never recorded twice. I want to welcome Jay, who is with me today in this podcast. Jay, hello, welcome. It's nice to have you here. Jay is a DPhil student in archaeology at the University of Oxford. And she is not only an archaeologist, she's specifically a maritime archaeologist, but she's also doing lots and lots of other things. I've seen cognitive stuff in your description of what you do, and you are doing a very interesting research in the seaways, as you call them. Do you call them seaways?
Oh, the waterscapes.
The waterscapes. Oh, Jesus Christ. I had one job.
No problem.
But we will talk about. So, do you want to introduce yourself to the people listening?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for inviting me, George, because it is really, really amazing to be able to talk about my PhD. So I'm a DPhil, but I'm also affiliated to the Oxford China Centre. So you're absolutely right. I'm also doing a lot of side projects, but all of them are related to my DPhil, really. So my DPhil topic is about reconstructing waterscapes. And I try to look at how, in the Chinese maritime context, how we can incorporate all these backlog of scholarships or literatures really existing in not just in mainland China, but Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. I want to bring them all together in my DPhil. So that's pretty much what I'm doing specifically for it. But as you can see, it's involving so many regions, and I have to probably look at things written in traditional Chinese. There will be other literatures written in Japanese or even Portuguese if we look at the Macau ones. So I would say that topic itself requires me to do a lot of side thing. So yeah, that's really what I'm doing for my DPhil.
Okay, all right. Let's break this down. Can you explain to us what is a seascape, a waterscape?
Right.
What does the word mean? What is a waterscape?
All right. So in a lot of the writings, you would have heard of maritime landscape. But the reason why I changed it to waterscape is because I want to reorient the focus to this maritime space that is not determined by the landscape around it, but really the people, the cognitive navigational or cognitive awareness of this spatial environment to then decide, how I'm going to navigate these bodies of water. And that works so well with southern parts of China. If you think of how many islands are there, how they're interacting with each other from different parts of the land border, if you want to be more specific. And there will be fishermen or seafarers from different parts of these lands joined together, navigating this same waterscape. So I really want to bring the idea of putting the geographical focus to the water itself instead of the land point. So that is the very probable reason why I'm considering my thesis as reconstructing waterscape rather than a typical reconstructions of maritime landscape.
Of course, and I think most of the times maritime cultural landscape is tied to like economic affiliations with the water, like how people make money out of the water. But I guess for you that's not the case, right? You're not looking only on like financial economic affiliations.
Well, it's a very good way of putting it. And it's also, I would say, a very practical way of how most people would frame maritime cultural landscape. Because if you think of the cargoes and then the products being traded through these vessels, of course, the most practical way to go forward is to look at their trading network. But that's also precisely the problem we don't have enough people engaging with the other parts of the realm, which is the cognitive spatial awareness of this maritime space. So, in a sense, I will tap onto that, but from the perspective of how they exploit the water to then achieve those trading routes, but more specifically on how these incidents of shipwrecks or wrecking point would be a concentration of disaster and how that impact people designing their navigational route. So in a practical sense, I will be looking into some climate data, climate historic data, matching it with the shipwreck zones, and essentially a lot of GIS will be involved in doing that
Of
thesis.
course.
And also bringing in the literature of navigational log or some mariners' diaries that we actually have a few in Macau and in some parts of Taiwan. So, of course, one very critical problem that I would be facing is how do I justify bringing four legal or jurisdictional bit into a thesis? And that is pretty much my bottleneck at the moment because on one hand, yes, I need to rely on shipwreck data that are collected from mainland Chinese provincial government or central government, but I also need to then overlay them with those found in Hong Kong, in Macau, and of course Taiwan. So it really sometimes gives people the impression that, oh, I'm diving into the more, how do I say, diplomatic bit in how we
Hmm.
discuss the Chinese maritime context. And I actually want to emphasize it's not the intention. Rather,
Okay.
I'm trying to really make sure people understand no matter what modern or historical factors are impacting these territorial boundaries, it doesn't change the fact that there are so many seafarers using that same body of water and they interact. And it doesn't have to be a Chinese operating in those bodies of water.
Hmm.
So that is one thing that I also want to bring out from my thesis.
Absolutely. I mean, I am of the opinion that archaeology is a heavily political science. Like it's involved everywhere, but of course, as you rightly mentioned, this is not always the case, especially in terms of waterscapes and like movement of people through water, where there's sometimes there's no real boundaries in a sea.
Right.
But before we go into more detail, I'm sorry, but I haven't asked you. Do you have like a chronological boundary of what you're doing?
Well, that's a very interesting example because currently I'm working with things that are found after the 12th century. So
Mm,
at the moment, I'm still quite early in my thesis.
okay.
So I'm not excluding too many shipwrecks. And if I'm putting it in a very practical manner, I'm dealing with about 500 sets of shipwreck data at the moment.
Wow.
Um, but those are really, if you think about it, a lot of them were not even with the basic surveys, only maybe 15 of them gone through some sort of excavation or proper surveying, whereas the other ones are accumulated through historical narratives, oral narratives, diverse communities, and also basically some legacy data from the colonial period. And that was the
Hmm.
case for Hong Kong because we have the UK Hydrographic Office that kept a lot of the shipwreck data, and a lot of the wreckage was considered modern.
Mm.
Perhaps we were talking about under 40 of them are historic. So adding them all together, I'm not dealing with a huge volume of data. And also, a lot of them are just coordinates, basic water depth information. So you have water visibility, you have when the basic site owner checks were being done. So it really is something I would consider like Parker's catalogue
Hmm.
on the
Yeah.
Mediterranean shipwrecks. He does a really excellent work in, I think it was in 1992, where he published
Probably.
that catalogue.
Yeah.
And I'm probably just replicating what he's doing, but appropriating it in the Chinese context.
All right. I mean, that sounds wonderful, and I really wish you like go through with it and do it to its complete. But being a naive European, living in England, I have to add. Can you give us, like, for the people listening who may not know just as me, can you give us like a historical context of what's going on in China during that period? Like, what is the history of it like? What's going on?
Well, I mean, it's such a long history.
Mm.
I can go all the way back to the Shashangzhou period, which is probably not relevant in our case because we do have a lot of historic um, narratives that perhaps talks about people using water. But if we look at some writings on how people navigate in rivers, we do have some people in northwestern China who does some um, river crossing research. So that applies to inland waters. And it usually happens after the Qin dynasty. And after the Qin dynasty, we've basically gone through a little bit more dynasties. One of which, the most popular one, would be the Tang dynasty, where China becomes this very open civilization. They have very good tea. They start to welcome foreign ambassadors or send people to Japan or to different parts of the world to interact with people. And they are very, very open minded. So that is probably about the 6th century to the 9th century. So we're still
Yeah.
talking quite early on, right?
Yeah. We're still back.
Yes. And then after that, we have the Song dynasty, where most people would consider as the decline of the Chinese civilization because of a lot of historical factors that we can't cover all.
Yeah.
But I think the very relevant period to maritime archaeology is the Ming dynasty, where there's a lot of stories about the general traveling with his very tall and leveled ships. It's going on expeditions using royal funds and go on with a big team. So that's the Admiral Chang He. We also have the sea bans that happens across Ming and Qing dynasty, where that also impact how people then navigate across the coastal area of China. And one very exciting map that we've got in the Bodleian Library is the Selden's map. I'm not sure if you have noticed the Bodleian Library actually has this exciting map called the Selden's map, where they discuss how different trade routes or different navigational routes were taken, and you can see the disproportionate parts of the land territory, and they exaggerate in certain elements of these rocks or cliffs because it was made to be interpreted by a navigator or a seafarer. So it's very exciting to look across this big, vast volume of historical narratives, and then to try to only focus on things that happens perhaps during the Ming dynasty and the Qing dynasty.
Yeah.
So yes, I hope this is.
Absolutely. But if I got you correctly, you're looking at a period that, based on the historical narrative, right? We see people, and especially emperors, and expressing wealth and powers through shipbuilding and through exploration. Is that the case?
Well, there's certainly that level in the Ming dynasty where they want to be able to tell people or other provincial governments that they are capable of building this huge tall ship with so many manpowers. They like to emphasize the number of people that were on those expeditions. They also like to talk about how they got the money for it, which is a lot. So there's a lot of interest even now in mainland China, where they look at the stories behind the expeditions. And certainly there are some archaeological excavation happening about those dockyards or dry docks that potentially would have built some of the models of those ships during the expedition. And certainly this is not really specifically my focus, because in a way I'm doing more of a overarch how should I say, almost like a god view of all these wreckage that has taken place in this body of water. And obviously historical factors or the change of dynasties and diplomatic relationship between China and all these other Southeast Asian countries are definitely part of the landscape of which, I mean, waterscape in which people choose how they navigate in
Yeah.
these waters.
Absolutely, yeah. But I still like the reason I asked is because I feel like when you talked about like cognitive archaeology and like trying to recreate the seascape, sometimes, I feel like when the ruling people, the government, whatever you want to call it, invest in their navy, kind of like sends a message of how people view their relationship with the sea. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like not even in on point right now. But like sometimes I tend to think that if a country has a very strong navy, then people tend to identify with said navy as a pride point for them, as a point of like, um, yeah, as a point of pride that, oh yes, I'm from a country where we have a very strong navy, hence a very good relationship with the sea. I don't know. Maybe I'm just spitballing
Ah,
stupid things now. Maybe I may be completely wrong, but sometimes I tend to
no.
think about stuff like that.
Yeah, it's actually a very good point to reflect in the case of the general who did the expedition, Zheng He. So there's this museum in Malaysia that
Mm,
actually commemorates his expeditions, which is, I mean, if you see it from a modern view, why would a museum in Malaysia wants to talk so much about this general that
yeah.
basically has this perhaps a national identity attached to it
Mm,
when people bring that up. So in a way, I would say perhaps that plays out
mm,
in some of the narratives, but not all the time, because we
yeah.
do see people just feel proud about having these kind of individuals that perhaps doesn't come from their own country, but they are
Mm,
celebrated in other modern territories or
absolutely.
countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a view that I would absolutely want to discuss more at some point.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. Especially when you talk about the things you talk about. So yeah, and I wanted to ask you now, um, how how did you come up with it? How did you come up with this topic? Or better, what does the topic mean to you?
Yeah, I think this is something I would like to talk more about than
Mm,
the previous
yeah,
topic,
go for
really.
it.
So, because it comes from me having two very loving parents who both are involved in some sort of maritime bits. So, my mum
Mm,
is a pearl expert, and my dad is a shipping expert. So they actually, since childhood, has been telling me about, oh, how do you get pearls from this particular water? Those pearls from this place would create a more lustrous pearls and all of that. I've started to hear it when I was young. And same with my father. He talks about, oh, the typhoon is going to hit in like 1 or 2 weeks. I need to make sure the cargo ships would arrive safely and I have to do something in advance. I'll have to work overtime. That kind of developed something really deep in me in wanting to do something about the maritime world. I haven't thought through at the time, maybe about 10 or 12. But it really changes me when I started working at the University of Hong Kong, where I started leading and co leading some expedition to some high altitude maritime environments in mainland China, where we basically go to places like the highest lake, the lake that is of the highest altitude in China, and we also look at different types of rivers in northwestern part of China, and all of that comes in a form of expedition, not really like a archaeological survey. So that was the time when I realized, oh gosh, there's so much into water, and even in northwestern part of China, you will be able to find how people respect and value water. So that built me into wanting to do something about the maritime past or the maritime history. But one bottleneck with just simply doing maritime history is you'll be relying on historical narratives. And as we all know, everybody has different voices that they want to bring out. And if you have a politician or have a political power that wants to talk how amazing their work has been in this dynasty, it would interrupt how the narrative will look. So that's when archaeology comes into play, where perhaps if we do maritime archaeology, we can uncover these new or even excluded uh, narratives that don't really is narrated, but they are shown in the object or the site itself. So I think that is the main reason why I really wanted to do maritime archaeology since COVID. So and the very big transitional point is I cannot do any more expeditions in mainland China during COVID
Yeah.
because of the lockdowns and all of that. And it was also the same time where I decided, okay, I'm gonna really look into this thing about water. How do I engage more with the watery bit of our surrounding? How do I be more aware of it, and how does it impact my identity as a person living in the fragrant harbor? So I grew up in Hong Kong, so water is a big
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, this is really one of the big factor why I then decided to do a DPhil.
Nice. So you mentioned a bit, but can you give us before we go more into it, a brief overview of your like academic career so far? So you did a bachelor's in Hong Kong.
Yes, I did.
Yes, and then
That's a very, thank you for bringing it up because I want to emphasize it.
oh,
In Hong Kong, you
my
can't
pleasure.
actually, yeah, exactly. In Hong Kong, it's a bit strange because we used to have a department in the University of Hong Kong, and it's called the School of Chinese. They used to have some archaeological course or researcher in that department, but that was back in the 1930s to 1950s. So after that, basically, if you want to do a full-on degree in Hong Kong, it is impossible because there's no one university in Hong Kong that offers a bachelor degree on archaeology.
Oh,
Isn't it strange?
that's very strange. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean,
It
unfortunate.
is so strange, right? So from that time when I was selecting, I remember I was talking to my dad. I was like, what can I do? And I started to look at the list that I'll be interested in. I was trying to look at, are there anything that is specifically archaeology? No, it was just art history or social science, all of that.
Mm.
So in a way that links to how I then um, I did my bachelor in the University of Hong Kong in art history
Mhm.
and social linguistics. And after that, I decided to do a master's degree at
Mhm.
Oxford. So that's when I met Damien and tell him about all these ideas that I have for Hong Kong and how I want to bring the voices of Hong Kong into the archaeological landscape and the academia and all of that. So after I did the master's degree, that's when I then go back and work a little bit in Hong Kong, did a little bit more local expeditions and also some projects. And after that, I returned to Oxford as a DPhil student to do this DPhil.
Lovely, lovely. Oh my god, that's so amazing. Why do you think? I mean, what am I asking now? But like, why do you think there's no archaeology degree in Hong Kong? And how do you go about changing that?
Yeah, in a way, well, to provide a context, we do have minor degrees
Hmm.
or postgraduate researcher who works as an archaeologist in Hong Kong. But as to the training of young archaeologists from a bachelor level, we just don't have it. And
Hmm.
if I have to conjecture the reason behind it, it would probably be about money and
Hmm.
funding and also the trend in Hong Kong where I mean, if you are typical Hong Kong students, your parents usually ask you to go for doctors and lawyers or at least a teacher because
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
pay better.
yeah.
In my case, I was very lucky because the first thing my parents telling me was, "Oh, you can do art if you want because it is something you like, and we totally support it. If we had the chance back in the days, we would probably do it, and
Yeah.
please do it before it's too late because you're
Mm.
still young. Um, so I really appreciate their very different parenting than those typical Hong Kong parents. So that I think that culturally has impact how perhaps a lot of University of Hong Kong wanting to invest most of their resources in medical or in things like digital technology
Yeah.
or how you can I mean now it's about all about AI, so if you do a degree in AI, this is something that everybody likes to hear, and this is like the golden
Yeah.
point.
Wow.
So yeah, this will probably culturally be the reason why we don't have it, because it's something that is just not so popular in Hong
Yeah.
Kong.
I get it. I mean, it's not like archaeology is the most popular subject anywhere, to be honest.
True.
Yeah, we hear a lot about, like, archaeology departments closing down and all that. But do you feel like your bachelor's in art history and social linguistics impacted you in your choice of research, or not at all? Because I think
It
if you
does.
maybe if you did like a bachelor's in archaeology and you studied, I don't know, pottery all day, maybe you have a different view on the world. I don't know. Is that something that happened?
Yeah, I actually love this question the most so far, because that is to some people, social linguistic is so far from archaeology if you look at it from a very general perspective. But from my perspective, it's precisely because I've studied social linguistic, and I specifically when I was doing my papers in my last year, it was about construction of power and politeness. So I was looking at two stream. How do people construct power through their words? And the conclusion in that paper is there are so many other intersectional layers that goes with the words that makes it powerful. For example, the pauses, and also the type of words they want to use to make their voice more inclusive or more imperatives. So that plays out really well when you look at archaeological reports. You see different kinds of researcher writing up reports. You see sometimes they're using us, sometimes I, and then you see, ooh, who is the boss here? Who is actually doing the work here? Or is it something else happening? Who is on the name list? Who is written, credited as collaborators? All of that plays out so very well in when I read the archaeological reports. And the same with art history, because a lot of what we were discussing in art history really is about different types of interpretations that
Mhm.
ultimately goes back down to your own worldview. So if you come from a typical European worldview, you might not understand that perhaps in some parts of Southeast Asian countries, patriarchy is not a thing. It was rather the mothers or the women who takes power in a lot of decision making process, and that includes archaeology. Certainly in Vietnam, there's a lot of excellent women maritime archaeologists I've met over the years that are critical in, for example, establishing Vietnam's first ever underwater archaeology department. It was done by a woman, and I'm so
Nice.
glad she's still doing it after she has retired from the department. So that plays out really well. So both the
Hmm.
training in art history specifically,
Yeah.
and social linguistics goes on really well when I then started my master's degree in maritime archaeology.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, I have to, like, I'm very proud to say that the Maritime Research Laboratory of the University of Cyprus, where I did my bachelor's, was established by a woman, and
Oh,
I
great!
was taught how to excavate, and I was introduced in maritime archaeology by a woman. So I'm full with you on that. And
Yeah,
as personally, as an epigraphist who for a living reads what people choose to write and tries to make assumptions and theories out of it, really appreciate your linguistic background right now. But anyway,
yeah.
um Jay, this has been amazing. I think I absolutely respect the depth that there's in you and in the maturity of your thought, and I believe that your research is absolutely phenomenal. And but I'm sure the people who listened are also as excited as I am and as intrigued or academically stimulated as I am by the things you said. And I can't wait to read more about your work and see more about your work and maybe read your DPhil one day when it's done. But no pressure. So, do you have any closing remarks to close this episode?
Well,
Well,
just to close this nicely,
hmm
there are a lot of great women out there that
hmm
are maritime archaeologists. And I'm just hoping one day to see someone doing something about collecting how many great women are working as maritime archaeologists. This is one of the things that I want to give everyone. It's just a little thought. And
hmm
hopefully, perhaps at some point, we can do something together about this topic.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, starting from, I don't know, the great Honor Frost to
Yeah.
all the other people and women that came after her. I mean, absolutely. So thank you very much. Cheers to that. Cheers to those last words. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the MARE Podcast. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.